Alex, good morning, brother. How we doing?
Yeah, really good. How are you doing?
Good. Yeah, very well. Thank you, mate. I just want to say I appreciate you being here. Ep.1 of the TheoClarkePodcast. And I just want to say thank you for coming down.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Are you more excited or more anxious about what we are doing?
I would say you've always got them kind of first time nerves, having the camera on you, the mic in front of you. It's a little bit different. Luckily, I'm used to kind of talking to clients and being put on pressure on a call. But I'm going to kind of remind myself that and see how we get on. But yeah, what about yourself?
Is it the same type of pressure for you? Or is it more scary here, being here? Because when we get that clap, I felt some nerves just coming down. Even though I enjoy talking to you and enjoy being in this setting, at the same time, there's something about having 3 cameras just staring at you.
Yeah.
How do you feel?
It's the unknown, isn't it? It's the unknown.
Sure.
Plus the fact that we've only known each other, a week?
Yeah.
And now we're jumping in doing a podcast together.
This is our second meetup.
You know what?
Yeah.
I feel like I've known you a very long time. And as I mentioned to you, the first time we met was one of my goals when I moved to Dubai was to start a podcast. It was something that I'd wanted to do for a long time.
Right.
And after that initial conversation that I had with you, I remember thinking, this is the guy. This is podcast number 1. I think you were probably the second or third person I'd met since I got to Dubai.
Yeah, right.
And here we are.
What was it that was so amazing about me that you wanted to
You
have
put me right
on?
on the spot now, haven't you? Do you know what it was? I think we both looked at each other after that hour-long conversation that we had in that coffee shop and went, you know what? This should have been a podcast. It was just the fluidity of the conversation. I think that's what I look for when talking to someone or engaging with someone.
Yeah.
Like I mentioned, you almost tend to be able to tell after the first few minutes if there's something there. Like, do I get this person? And I think we met each other through, originally I put a post in Capital Club, right?
Yeah.
Luke Belmar's Discord community. And I put a post in there just saying, look, relocating to Dubai soon, some of my interests, and the date of arrival. And you reached out and I think we got here like a day apart.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I arrived on the 29th.
28th. Yeah.
And there you go. And then a week later, we sat in a coffee shop, having not met each other before, but just knowing that I think I knew that if you were in that community, there would be something that we have in common. I mean, it's weird to say I look up to Luke Belmar because he's younger than me, but the way he speaks, the way he articulates himself, something I'm struggling to do right now, there's something very sort of like attractive to the way that he talks and presents himself and the way he gets his points across. And I think that's something that maybe I aspire to be, articulate in the way that I talk and just to be able to provide value in quite a concise way. So maybe we'll get some golden nuggets from this podcast.
1000%, man. He really articulates everything so precisely and he doesn't have any ums and ahs.
No.
Very difficult thing to do. And I have recently learned to take out a lot of ums and ahs. And I think another thing that I say a lot is and. I say a lot of ands. Ands don't need to be there a lot of the times. What are the things that you actually look for in terms of qualities in people when you meet them for the first time? Because you're going to meet a lot of people in Dubai, man, and a lot of entrepreneurs, but people are very different. They have different intentions, different directions. So I think it's very important to know exactly what type of people you want in your tribe.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to know what made you feel like you clicked, clicked.
Well, I've been on this planet for 27 years now, and I feel like every single day I'm growing and evolving and I understand things more. And I think hopefully part of that evolution is being able to read people and get a gauge on someone. Now, that's not to say that I don't make mistakes, but what I mean is I'm at the point now where I think, as I mentioned earlier, you just can tell, maybe it's a gut feeling when you kind of click with someone. But the things that I look for in people with regards to them as a person would just be the way that they kind of carry and present themselves. Do they care about the way that they're kind of being presented? And I think that's something that stands out to me about Dubai is not even the image factor, but everyone has almost like this inner self-respect, or at least that's how it kind of comes across. Like everyone cares about the way in which they're presented and not even in like what's the right way of saying it? I can't think of the word at the moment, but in a humble way as well. I think that's another thing that I'll look for. So the way in which someone presents themselves, whether or not they're a humble individual, and that doesn't mean that you can't be successful, but I just mean humble in the way that you carry yourself, not thinking that they're maybe better than other people for something that they've done or that they've achieved. And then lastly, I would just say is just good morals. You know, at their core, what's their morality like?
How can you tell if I'm lying?
Well,
someone's lying.
Well, I guess that comes back to me saying I feel like I can read people. You know, I don't get the impression that you're a liar.
Yeah.
I mean, true. I've only known you for a week, but you seem like a good, genuine guy. And I guess I see parts of myself in you on the basis that the conversation that we have is so fluid when we, to a degree, barely know each other, right?
Yeah, for sure.
But what about you? What would
we
you say
talked about the maybe I shouldn't bring this up, but talked about Luke Belmar's brother.
Mm-hmm.
And I noticed that the way he speaks is very similar to how Luke Belmar speaks, which is very profound, and he talks a lot in fundamentals of reality. And it felt very scripted, and it didn't flow as naturally as Luke Belmar's way of speaking did. And I think that I think humans are so intelligent. Our subconscious power can really pick up on a lot of signals. Even the people with lower IQs, maybe they don't have much experience out in the world. I think as animals, we can pick up on those things. I think it's in the very fundamental part of our brains. We can pick up the signals of who is in charge of the room, who is actually genuine, who's not. Of course, it depends on the level of the other person's ability to con the other person. But at the same time, everybody has very strong capabilities to be able to pick up. But I think as we are more conscious of who we are trying to let into our tribe, we probably have a stronger sense in terms of who has good morals, who has good intention and whatnot.
I think it comes from experience, and I'd even relate it back to what I was just saying a moment ago about almost having that gut feeling. I think this is something that Ty Lopez actually speaks on. I remember my business partner Joe talking to me about it. I think it was Ty Lopez. He talks about how that gut feeling means so much more than what people think it does, and actually really you need to trust that more often. And I think it all relates back, right, to what you're saying and what I'm saying, which is hopefully being able to read someone, hopefully being able to trust your gut. And the only way that you can get to that point is through prior experience. You know, you get burned in the past, or you have the wool pulled over your eyes. And I think the only way you truly learn and progress is by making mistakes, maybe putting trust in the wrong people. And hopefully you learn from that and don't keep going back and going around in circles. You realize you made a mistake, you realize you put trust in the wrong person, and then you start to identify the qualities in that individual that you shouldn't be associated with and the things that you should avoid. And then on the flip side, the sort of things that you should be looking for in people, like morals. I mean, I think I've gone on a bit of a tangent there. I know you started talking about Nate, and we've now gone into kind of the sort of things I pick out in people. That's not to say I would judge Nate in that way. I don't even know him.
Yeah, I don't know.
But I know what you were referring to was what we spoke about previously, which was his course on health and wellness as part of the Capital Club. I'm about halfway through that, and I felt the exact same way you did, that it almost seemed a little bit scripted, where the choice of words he was using, it made it almost a little bit more difficult to follow than if he had just maybe not dumbed down the vocabulary, but I know what you're trying to say, just almost be natural and be himself. But then, you know, we've not met him, so who's to say what the natural Nate is? But talking about how it came across,
I think it's really good feedback for him. Like, I don't know if he's ever going to watch this, but I'm not putting down any of the content that he's putting out. He has really good information, but it's just that Ty Lopez really hones in on, he says that he's a big fan of just saying the things that you want to say the way it is. Instead of sugarcoating it or making it sound more fancy. If you think of things and you want to say it like it is and it doesn't sound very fancy, be that way. I think
Be yourself.
Yeah, people really value authenticity a lot more than anything else. One thing I noticed, there's a guy called there's a controversial guy that appeared on Fresh and Fit, and he calls girls like, you know, bad words, and he's very like screaming all the time, very confronting. But I was wondering, why is this guy able to get away with anything he says, and girls are still attracted to him? And also guys are not really judging him as much as they would if it was someone else saying it. It's because he's authentic. And as long as that's who you are, I think you can actually get away with anything.
Yeah.
That's sort of a realization that I'm coming to understand. Yeah.
I think it honestly just comes down to being yourself and whether or not you truly mean what you're saying. Yeah. There's a thing that Tate says that I really relate to and I like it. And he just says, I mean what I say and I say what I mean. And I think really what he kind of means by that is like what you're saying, he truly just expresses himself in a way that he's actually thinking. Do you know what I mean? He doesn't hold back. He says what he thinks. And I know he's somewhat controversial in his approach sometimes, and maybe that was part of his marketing tactics and the way to get reach and exposure. But I think at its core, it's just speaking out about things that other people are maybe afraid to speak of, but they're actually thinking anyway. You know what I mean? 100%. And just putting that voice out there. And I think that's what a big part of what this podcast is about and content is. I remember Justin Waller talking about how the content that he produces actually attracted like-minded individuals to reach out to him. And I thought, well, yeah, of course, that makes so much sense. Like, if you're putting content out and it's real and it's authentic, then of course that should attract more like-minded people, right? So in a way, this should also be a catalyst to meet more like-minded individuals and just connect with more people who are just like yourself. And I think Dubai is a great place to do that.
What if somebody has a very controversial opinion on something and they don't have the facility or capabilities to articulate in a politically correct way or a way where other people can sort of understand? Should that person hold back from saying that because maybe that person is not ready to handle all the flack? Do you reckon they should actually just say it anyway? If I was like 17 years old, I had no vocabulary like I do now, and I didn't have the finesse in the way I talk. If I said I was very rough in the way I spoke, bro, I was just like, oh, bro, I don't even want to say the examples. So in that retrospect, it makes me wonder what's the best way to go about life. Just be authentic when you're not complete and you don't really know what the right ways are, or experiment and actually just say it. Yeah, what do you think about that?
I think it comes down to the confidence you have in yourself behind what you're saying. Are you speaking based on, you know, just something that you've suddenly thought about and not really thinking about the consequences of sharing that? Yeah. Or is it something that you've been thinking on for a long time and you want to get your point across because it's something you've truly analysed and you truly believe? So I think it comes back to the true belief in what you're saying, because I think a lot of people will say things maybe for attention, maybe for the wrong reasons. And in those cases, I would suggest actually holding back and not sharing that information. If it doesn't have good intention behind it, then don't share it. And that doesn't mean you can't say things that other people might find controversial. Who am I to say? But what I mean is just make sure that you truly believe what you're saying and have the confidence to say it. And 100%. Then you can't really regret an opinion that you shared, because at that time or at that point in your life, based on what you knew, you believed that.
I think that nuance is very, very important, because a general audience would hear what you say. Just be authentic. If you think, even if it's controversial, just say it out loud. Some people are very rough in their way of speaking and communicating with other people. They can really stir up some environments, and it can cause bad consequences. And understanding that nuance that you just talked about will save so many bad situations.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's just the intent behind what you're saying. I think but it comes down to your morality as a person, right? So again, something that I would also use to identify someone that I would like to associate myself with is the authenticity, the morality behind what they're saying.
In terms of morality, one of the questions that I always ask when I meet an ultra wealthy person is, because I will say to them, hey, you have seen a lot of wealth, a lot of wealthy people. Is the world more or less more corrupt or is it more good intentioned but misunderstood? And a lot of them, actually all of them said it's more corrupt than good intentioned. And the question now is, do you think what percentage of the people are living their lives with good intentions, good morality?
That's a really, really good question. And my perception on that has changed since moving to Dubai.
Okay.
And
already. Yeah. 2.5 weeks now it's been.
Yeah. So what arrived on December 29th, it's now Jan 17th.
Yeah.
2.5 weeks. But I've never felt more at home. I'm not massively traveled.
Yeah.
Like I've always lived in the UK. I've been on holidays the same way anyone else would, but not an excessive amount, you know?
Right.
Never really been to anywhere else on kind of this side of the world. Not many long haul flights, put it that way. But to kind of circle back to your question, what I've noticed here is religion is a key part of everyone's life. Yeah. You'll be walking around or talking to someone and all you hear is Alhamdulillah, and everyone's saying praise be to God and things like that. And it's almost a little bit, it catches me off guard to just, because I'm not used to hearing people saying things like that in the UK. I'm not used to people referencing God in everyday life. Yeah. And I don't know whether you're religious or not. And I am almost becoming more religious the more I've moved away from the UK. And like I say, I know it's only been a few weeks, but there's almost like a certain energy here, and the lack of police, the lack of corruption here, at least from what I can see. I've not been here a very long time, but when I say lack of police, I mean it in a good way. You feel safe here, and the only thing I can put it down to, but I'm interested in getting your opinion, is I believe that religion is creating that law and order and instilling what we're talking about, which is stoicism, good morals, and things like that. And that's what I would say. I would say the corruption depends on where you're located. You can't talk about the world as a whole, because I think each country, things are run differently. And I can only use my comparison of the UK to Dubai, but they're two very, very different places. And I personally feel as though the UK is very corrupt. Yeah. People will say, or like Tate will say, you moved to Romania because, you know, if you get caught speeding, you just pay a fine or this or that. Whereas the UK, you can't even drive a car now into London without a ULEZ zone picking up that you're there, sending you a fine in the post unless you pay for it, paying for tolls, it's just, the UK is corrupt, but it's corrupt in your face. Like, you don't see it because it's the government that's doing it all. Whereas maybe in Romania, like Tate says, the police will pull you over and you pay a fine and then you're on your way. I think it's less in your face, but there's different levels of corruption depending on where you are. I also think,
you know, in UK, just like you said, it's very heavily policed. It's very heavily...
It needs to be.
Yeah, heavily policed. And also in Dubai, there are very strong systems, and rules to follow. For example, if you swear in public, you can get fined.
I didn't know that.
It's crazy. I just watched some reels, and some of the reels, like 6 things that you didn't know about Dubai. And one of the things was like, if you say bad words, or if you, there were also like, if you take photos of other people with, you know, their permission, and there were some other crazy ones as well. I think the reason why you get the good sense or good vibes from Dubai as opposed to UK, even though they have very heavily systemized environments, is because the intentions behind it. So if you have speed cameras everywhere trying to pick up, it's very, I think it's, it makes sense to think the government wants more money from the citizens. It's not for the safety of others. You know what I mean? Because they are trying to push you to drive electric cars. So they find, or they give you a fee if you drive gas or petrol-based cars. What's the intention behind that? What does that help? Yeah,
control.
Exactly right.
It is complete and utter control, because how many people can afford to go out and buy an electrical vehicle? Not many.
Yeah.
So that means people that are then relying on petrol or, like you say, gas to get around, all of a sudden they can't drive in London without paying a ULEZ charge, which is £12.50 a day, by the way. So what would that equate to? That's like, my maths isn't great there, I'm getting here, 75 dirhams, maybe 70 dirhams a day to drive.
Yeah, wow.
And that's every day. So imagine you need to
Just get
drive
an Uber
every
now.
day of the year. Exactly. Yeah, you
Honestly.
probably need to. But what it does is it further segments the wealth gap, because not everyone can go out and buy an electric vehicle. And even then, why? What's the point? Like you say, what does that really do? They've implemented it in London, but now they're expanding, right?
Yeah.
So eventually you'll probably see ULEZ cameras all over the UK.
Yeah.
And people are pushing back. They're breaking them down, knocking them down and doing all sorts. But you have to push back some way. And maybe that's the only way they know how to push back. But in the end, that's kind of how you end up feeling in the UK, is you feel a little bit helpless, because they just clamp down and down and down. And ultimately, they just implement these things without any say-so. And you've got, what can you do other than just follow the rules?
If you are in a hostile environment, the best thing is to save yourself and get yourself out of there. And here we are. I am a big believer that if we have great systems within which we operate, things are always going to get better. Because let's say you run a business, and if it doesn't have systems in place and you just let everybody decide what they want to do, it's gonna fall to crap. You know, it's just gonna fall apart. Just the way discipline can create freedom in your life, it's the same way systems can create great moralities, great people, if the intentions behind the systems are good.
Yeah. Well, exactly. But you could relate that back to, I mean, I'm not calling the Bible or the Quran a system, but if you relate it back to that, which ultimately is almost like a guide on how to live
right.
The do's and don'ts, the rights and wrongs. And I think that's, again, not to compare, well, actually I am comparing the UK to Dubai. That is the difference. The UK has drifted very, very far away from Christianity. Yeah. I don't know anyone that goes to church regularly. Right. But yet, what do you hear in Dubai? You hear the call to morning prayer.
Yep.
You hear everyone speaking kindly. I mean, like I say, I've only been here 2.5 weeks. I can't speak on whether or not that's the way I'll see it long term, but on the experience that I have had, everything is positive.
Yeah.
And why? Because there are guidelines and there are disciplines in the form of religion.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah. I am big on nuances, but there are mixed opinions I heard on Dubai. I would like to present the other side.
Yeah.
So one thing is that I think Dubai is an amazing place for entrepreneurs like ourselves, but for the locals and for the third country residents who came here to make money, they are underpaid, and the infrastructure here is this is what I heard from people who are running businesses for a long term in Dubai, and the infrastructure is not that tight, just a very shiny front where everything looks amazing, and it probably is for people who are somewhat well off. But for people who are just making day to day with their jobs, it is a very competitive and very difficult place to live in. It's like Bali. When you're in Bali, you have a lot of freelancers who are, making, let's say, $10,000 a month, whereas a wage there is like $180 a month for the locals.
Yeah, but the entrepreneurs, looking at it from a different perspective, are what then fuel the economy and allow all of those people to have so many jobs. Yeah. And when you're looking at salary, I'd heard similar things to you, right? About someone even used the term racist and said, people are getting, like what you're saying, people are treated differently based on where they're from and how much they're paid. Now, I've not personally experienced that yet, or seen that yet, but I asked an Uber driver because I was intrigued. Yeah. He mentioned that he'd been in Dubai. This was actually when I was on holiday back in September. He'd said, I've been here for 12 years. I think he was originally from Pakistan, which forgive my geography, but I think it's not too far away from here. And you get a lot of people come over from Pakistan and India to work here. And I said to him, what do you think of Dubai? And he said, I love Dubai. And I said, so what is it that made you come here over your staying in Pakistan? Because I was intrigued. I thought, if it's true, if these people are being underpaid and if they're being put into a very competitive environment, why would they choose to be here? Why would they stay? And he explained it from an angle that kind of made sense. He said, because back in my home country, he said, it's very hard to stay on the straight and narrow and do well because there's so much corruption. There's so many people trying to take a piece of what you've got, pull you in different directions. There's corruption at a corporate level from the government and things like that. And he said, you don't get that in Dubai. He said, yes, I have to work long hours, but I know the money that I earn is mine and I can then send that home and provide for my family. So I think it really, really, truly depends on the perspective. Again, this is just one man's opinion. But the question I would ask is, if someone's being treated so badly, why would they choose to be here? I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
That makes sense, man. So maybe we can say that it's even worse in Pakistan. And maybe it's somewhat bad. Maybe it's bad everywhere. If you look at it from the lens of entrepreneurs, because entrepreneurs make generally a lot more than the average person. Yeah. Maybe that's the way it is.
For sure. But then I also think, like I said, these countries, you'll notice ever since COVID, a lot of countries have kind of opened their doors and they're trying to make really competitive and compelling scenarios to invite entrepreneurs over. I think you mentioned Bali. I'm not sure if it's Bali or Thailand, but they've implemented their it's not called an entrepreneur visa, it's the digital nomad visa maybe. Dubai has the 10-year golden visa for people who invest. Like all these countries, they want money to come here and they see the opportunity that is now opening up with the UK or the West in general somewhat slowly declining and falling, because I almost think the West can kind of see this happening, which is why they're tightening their grip on the control. They almost instill fear to make people feel as though they're trapped. And, actually, fair play to the people that leave their home country to go somewhere else, because I think a lot of the time they go in there because they believe they're going to be treated better or they see opportunity, and they're doing what a lot of people are scared to do. So, I think it really comes back to their reasoning behind why they may be here in Dubai and what is it that they're running away from or hoping to achieve here versus what the scenario is back home.
Why are you here in Dubai?
Good question.
What made you choose Dubai over other places, beautiful places like Spain or whatnot?
I would say a lot changed with regards to my perspective on the UK ever since COVID. COVID did two things for me. It provided me with the opportunity to become an entrepreneur, and that's where I actually got involved in e-commerce, high-ticket dropshipping.
You weren't before?
No. Okay. No. So I've only really been in the entrepreneurial space.
So COVID actually made you think about it and forced you into it?
It gave me the time, which I didn't previously have because I was working full-time.
Okay.
It presented me with the opportunity to work from home. And finally, suddenly have time to invest in myself, where prior to that I was investing time into the company that I was working for.
Oh, okay.
So this, I'll get to where I'm kind of going with this at the moment, but I think it's important to explain that on the journey. So that opened my eyes up to what was kind of possible from a laptop. I always knew you could make income from a laptop, and my goal was always to be able to be remote. That I think that for a lot of people that is the ideal. You want to be able to travel, you want to be able to go somewhere and not be told, like I was in my previous employment, you have 20 days paid leave a year. 20 days. 20 days to go and enjoy yourself and live life. I mean, if anything, I go on holiday even less than that now. But when you're doing what you want every day, it doesn't feel like work. And I know that's the cliche way of saying it, but it doesn't. So that's kind of how I got into the entrepreneurial space, if you like, and the life I was trying to create. As to why I picked Dubai, during COVID, I was watching a lot of YouTube, in indulging in podcasts. And there's a few people I look up to in the entrepreneurial space. There's a guy from the UK called the British Entrepreneur. You've got Iman Gaji, you've got Mike Thurston. They're all guys from the UK who at some point were, well, I believe Mike Thurston and Iman are both still here. There's a guy called the British Entrepreneur. He's back in the UK now, I think. But they all moved to Dubai. And I was watching their content and just hearing them speak about how great it was and how much of an opportunity it was. And I thought, well, the one thing I have in common with these guys, I like to think, is the way that they think. They have the same mindset as me.
Yeah.
And they see the UK in the same way. They can see where it's headed and where it's going, and they chose Dubai. So I thought there's something here. There's some consistency here in the location that people are choosing.
You're very smart because you delegated thinking to other people who already did the thinking.
Well, there you go. I mean, I guess so. I didn't think about it that way, but maybe. I guess it's trying to be rational in your decisions, right?
Yeah.
And then everything kind of came together at the same time. The company got to the point, as in my company got to the point where I was earning enough money that I could potentially relocate out here and it was feasible. Also, I visited here in September with my girlfriend, made sure she felt comfortable and wanted to be here. And we both just decided to go for it.
Yeah, okay.
I think it was more me leading the decision and her kind of following suit. But then, you know, after she'd got over the fact that we were going to relocate, I think she was very excited.
Yeah. How was the conversation? So why was she against it? Or what was the strong points that you were able to present to her? Hey, we should go to Dubai.
Yeah. The first time I ever had a conversation with her and said, you know, would you ever consider living abroad? She actually got quite upset and she was like, you know, maybe we both want different things. You know, I want to stay here, be with my family. I want to have a family here. You know, she's one of 4 siblings and they're all girls. Yeah. They all got in relationships young. They all had children young. She's the youngest of the pack and the last one to have children. So I think in her mind, she wanted to follow the path that her sisters had followed and stay local to her family and things like that. And the more we spoke about it, and kind of the more I just showed her it from my perspective, I was like, look, I'm not saying forever. You know, we'd only ever be a plane flight away. I explained all the things that I disliked about the UK and the direction that it was going, you know, the money I would potentially save from a tax perspective. Yeah. And I think over time, the more we spoke about it, the more she kind of came around to it. You know, I had that initial pushback, but I think really, you know, she just wanted to stay close to family. Like, I think, not to say most women do, but I think, not to say I'm not family orientated, but I think typically, maybe I'm wrong, but women tend to be more than men. I
people
think,
oriented for sure.
Yeah. And more emotional, you know, and I think distance for them, not to categorize all women, but is maybe more.
Bro, we can't even say things the way things are now. We have to be so careful with the way. Yeah. Oh my God, people are just so sensitive these days. It's strange. You know, I talked to one of a wealthy individual in Dubai. Yeah. And it was a female. Okay. And she was just so upset over the feminism that was happening in the US. I don't really want to get into this topic. It's not something that I'm passionate about.
Go for it.
But it seemed to be something that a lot of other countries are noticing in the West. And if you really talk to people who are doing well, they all agree that feminism has done worse things than good. But they will not talk about it because we want to save our faces. You know what I mean?
Well, let's get into it. Let's go for it. I know exactly where you're coming from, and I think I do understand why it's created more of a problem because previously, let's go back maybe even 1 generation or maybe even 2. Yeah. So if I can only really relate this back to the UK, but you know, in the 1940s there was the, testing my history now, Second World War, right? And I think that was a time when men were going to war, the women were staying at home looking after the children, and everyone had such a clearly defined role. Yeah. You know, the men were going out and fighting for the country, and the women were staying home and mothering and looking after the children and making sure everyone was okay. As time progressed, we've slowly drifted away from people having roles, and I know it's okay. We're not currently living during a time of war, at least not in the UK. So I know, many countries are right now. And I'm not to say that the war was what provided that structure, but I think over time we've drifted further and further away from that structure, and there's no clearly defined roles anymore. The cost of living has also increased significantly because the value of the pound has gone down due to inflation and due to the banks printing money. So what you have is this scenario where the roles aren't clearly defined anymore. The cost of living has increased, so women also need to work now. Not to say that women didn't work in the 40s, I don't know, but I know that they were definitely looking after the children at that time, and it was typically the role of the man to provide for the family. But as we drift further and further away from that and the cost of living increases, women are now having to work to assist with the cost of living and providing also on, being able to purchase a house, being able to put food on the table and things like that. It's becoming more and more difficult for the average man to cover that with his salary. So now you have this confusion of roles where both the male and the female are providing for the household. And yet previously it would just be the women's role to protect and to look after the child while the man provides. And then I think this is where there's this confusion, especially with that kind of like narrative now of like, you don't need a man, you can kind of do this on your own and all this kind of stuff. Like, if you truly believe that, then good luck to you. But I think it's a normal thing to have
all
a man and a woman.
All those sayings come from anger, right?
Yeah.
It comes from like, I need to be empowered as much as men. It's all of frustrations. Those sayings come from a ill origin, in the frame of the mind.
Yeah. It's an interesting one. Yeah. I mean, who really knows what way it's going to go or how it's going to play out? I can only really give my perspective on it. I mean, what do you think about the whole situation?
Well, I can tell you, when I came to Dubai, things became very clear to me. So beautiful women are everywhere, and amazing guys are also everywhere. And women just expect you to take care of them, and that make me feel good. No, I want to take care of them. I want to do everything. I want to be this confident guy, charismatic, and someone that other guys want to be like, just man of competence.
You are all of those things.
Well, so at the same time, I started having this standard that it's normal for women to be beautiful. When I was in Australia or in other places, I would see a beautiful woman and I would feel that, oh, she's beautiful, man. Oh my gosh, she's so, like, I have to like go talk to her or something. Here, they're everywhere. They really look after themselves and it feels normal. And it almost feels like, of course it's my job to be this amazing guy. And on the flip side, I think it makes sense for them to perhaps feel like, of course it's my job to be beautiful. And for me to say that, if that feels controversial, there's something wrong there in the whole frame of mind.
Yeah.
So I am not very fond of feminism, but I don't stir up the pot when I don't need to. Like I can see in a lot of female friends' mindsets, the feminism is very deeply rooted in there. I don't go out of my way to say, hey, I don't think that's how you should think. I just accept them as they are. I want them to be happy. So that's where I stand.
Do you not feel as though also you should be able to give your opinion on it without like snap back? Because I feel like I
only want to talk about it if they want to learn about it or want to change about it. Because people are not convinced, I don't think. They will believe what they want to believe. And if they are somewhat open-minded and the conversation flows in a positive way where they can fathom the possibility that feminism is not good for them, I will then bring it up. But I don't go out of my way, hey, I see feminism there, let me talk about this and change you.
No, of course. I think a good question to ask someone that has that mindset is, why do you feel this way? I think that would be a good thing to understand, because Are they just saying it based on something else that they've heard and that they agree with, and they think, yeah, this is right, this is the right way of thinking? You know, I think that would be my question, and maybe they've got an instant answer to that. I don't know.
Yeah.
But hey, that's life, right? Everyone can have their own opinions, and that's just what keeps things moving, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. And how does your girlfriend feel about being in Dubai now? She's been here for 2.5 weeks. How happy is she?
I think she's very happy. She works less hours. Her hours here are really great. I mean, in the UK...
Why is that? Why is there a difference?
What, compared to the UK?
Yeah.
So in the UK, she was working 7:30 till 5:30, sometimes 6 some days, which is a very, very long day. She worked at a nursery, at a preschool, essentially. So she's got the exact same job over here, but she works 7:30 till 2:30. So she's, reduced her hours by almost 3 hours a day. That's 15 hours a week.
Wow.
And she's getting paid more than what she would in the UK.
No way.
Yeah, she has her own room in the nursery. She's got a teaching assistant. So I think she's almost taken not a step up because she had her own room and her own children that she looked after in the UK.
Yeah.
But she's working less hours. She's got less children in her class, so it's better for them as well. It's more focused. In the UK, it kind of felt like they would just squeeze as many children as they can into a classroom, and it was manageable. But there's so many children in there, and the more children that you've got, the less attention you can give to each child, right? Yep. So here she's got a smaller classroom. She's working less hours. She's getting paid more. And look at the weather. I mean, look around. I think she's very happy from a work perspective. And then it also gives us the opportunity on weekends to go out and enjoy ourselves. I think this Sunday we're going to head to the safari park.
Nice.
Have you seen it?
No, I haven't seen it.
That looks like a nice day out. Saturday we might go out for a meal and get some food. Last weekend we were down the beach. I mean, it's January and we're going out to safari parks, the beach, going out for meals. So I think that's the other thing, to give some context. In the UK, I lived in a small seaside town. And I mean, like, it's how you could probably picture it. It's not like Australia, or at least my perception of Australia, where it's beautiful beaches and maybe quite busy and quite commercialized. This was like a really small seaside town in the UK with arcades along the seafront. Do you know what arcades are? Yeah. So
I heard a lot of people who live in London, they always say the sky is always grey. Is it true? And is it everywhere? Which areas in UK the weather is sort of gloomy, where it's dark and cold?
I mean, in winter, yes, definitely. I mean, the weather in winter is cold. I think there's actually, yesterday there was snow in the UK.
Right.
So it does get cold. In general, is it grey? In winter, it's just dark. It's just dark in winter. The daylight hours are very short. I wouldn't, I mean, maybe you get sunrise at like, I don't know, 8 a.m, maybe a little bit earlier than that, and then sunset at sort of 4 in winter, like at its shortest period. So I guess it's not massively different to the daylight hours here.
Okay.
But here the air is just warmer.
Yeah.
You get the cold and the grey. I don't know. What's it like in Australia? I just imagine Australia being somewhere that's kind of hot and sunny year round, but I don't know.
I also lived in this little town called Canberra. It's actually the capital of Australia. People think it's Sydney or Melbourne.
I didn't know that. Yeah, I would have thought Sydney.
Yeah, so I heard this brief history. I'm not 100% sure. I don't really care. But apparently Sydney and Melbourne were quarreling over who is going to become the capital city of Australia. And the government said, stop fighting. We make ACT, Canberra, right in the middle. And it's a very small city. Over there, when I was living there, people are not very happy with the weather. They're not happy in general. A lot of government people, because the government is there, And yeah, it's very, very cold in the winter season, very hot in the summer season. But in Gold Coast, I lived there for a year or so. It's beautiful. It's really fantastic there. I think it's similar to Bali without the wet season. So it's amazing there.
So I've got a couple of questions actually.
It's like Hawaii of the US, and I haven't been to Hawaii. Just the perception of it, you can see.
So 2 things I wanted to ask.
Yeah.
Dubai, we're like halfway to Bali now, and actually Bali's forgive my geography, not a million miles from Australia either, right?
Yeah, it's close.
So for me, being from the UK, I'm almost halfway there, being in Dubai, and would love to kind of see that part of the world. That's also somewhere I've always wanted to go. But the question I was going to ask was, and I think I mentioned this when we spoke originally and we were talking about Australia, is quite a few people from the UK, or at least people that I know, are actually going over to Australia now and doing like a 2-year visa, working out there. And a friend of mine not long got back from Australia. He was visiting some family out there. And I think it was his first time visiting, and he spent, I don't know, maybe a couple of weeks there.
Yeah.
And the way he described it, I don't know the exact area, unfortunately. I want to say like Melbourne, but I might be wrong. He said it was just so different to the UK. And what he meant by that was, well, first of all, the weather's beautiful. He said, you know, the animals and the birds and the things you just see, like the wildlife. Yeah. He also said people just were friendly and would start conversation over there. Yeah, I don't know if you have the same, but in the UK, if you pass someone on the street, you wouldn't really, people don't even really make eye contact. People sort of avoid confrontation in the UK.
Yeah, I see.
At least from my perspective. Whereas he said he was just walking along out there. You know, someone might be walking along at the same sort of speed as you and sort of go, oh, hello mate, like how's it going? And just start chatting to him. He mentioned he was sitting outside of a shop on a bench just with a coffee while he was waiting for his family, and they were in a shop shopping. And a woman came down and sat next to him and just started chatting to him, and he was like, he just didn't ever experience anything like that, and he enjoyed it so much, the way of life and the way, I guess, the culture out there, that he's decided to go out there this year and spend some time there. So do you have a similar, is it like that in Australia? Does it depend where you are? What are your thoughts?
I think in my perspective, I have a studious friend who flies to London often, and that is her absolute worst, least favorite flight, because the passengers are, her words, very up themselves. And maybe it's a lot worse in the UK, but Australia, I don't think is as utopian as your friend experienced it. Maybe it's like the relative, you know, happiness or the friendliness compared to UK. A lot of my Australian friends would say Australian people are also up themselves. And as an Asian person who grew up in Australia, we experienced a lot of racism as well.
Really?
There was one story that is particularly bad. So my mom was waiting at a bus stop, and in bus stops in Australia, we have a little shelter that looks like a little pod. And she was just sitting there, and these bogans, have you ever heard of the term bogans? No. Bogans are like tradies who are very confident but arrogant. It's kind of like jockeys, but a worse version, like who will drink a lot more. You know what I'm saying? So sort of ratchet but white. You know, that's the description I give about bogans. Yeah. But these bogans were driving in a crappy car, and they spotted my mom and they threw eggs at her. Just being, you know, saying the racist like gook, you know, all those slangs. And I experienced those things on a lot more subtle levels throughout my life. And it made me become very strong. So because of those experiences, I don't only have positive outlook on Australia. I think that because also the taxes, like it goes up to 49% in Australia, so and it's similar in the UK. Yeah. And during COVID, I think Melbourne was the longest lockdown city of the world, and people were suffering there. So the level of control there is very severe also. It's probably, by the sounds of it, a little bit better version in terms of livability, happiness than UK. But yeah, that sort of still exists, and people are friendly in general. We do say hello on the street if we are walking past each other and there's nobody else. Hey, g'day, mate. And say bye. That's it.
Do people say that? I associate that as being like a typical Australian
We
phrase.
absolutely say that all the time. G'day, mate.
I think Australia is probably one of the only places, as well as the UK, where you use the term mate. Would you say? Or does it get used elsewhere?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. It's also only Australia. I don't really hear that from other people. For sure.
I say mate all the time.
Yeah.
Not so much now that I'm here because I haven't got many friends yet. But in the UK, I would say mate quite a lot. Yeah.
Have you ever talked to your girlfriend about where you want to live for long term? Or do you have a dream scenario, like a utopian scenario where you wake up in the morning and you are a certain age, you have a certain number of kids, you are in this country and you have this house? Have you thought that out with your...
No, I mean, we've had discussions. I think what we're experiencing now in Dubai is very new for us. It's our first time moving in together and living in an apartment.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Very new. That's new. We're in a different country. She started a new job. I'm exploring new things. I'm doing a podcast. I'm creating content. So life is just suddenly gone through quite a lot of changes for us. Yeah. So it's difficult for me to look past this point much at the moment in terms of what my life would look like, because I feel like I'm living exactly where I want to be right now. So I'm not thinking ahead massively at the moment. For a long time, I was visualizing what my life would be like in Dubai, and so far it's been everything I expected and more. But I haven't thought too far yet into the future. I think.
Do you have an idea for yourself?
I'll answer it in a slightly different way.
Okay.
I just want to feel how I do now in terms of freedom.
Nice.
And also I want to be able to feel safe and to be able to have my family somewhere that's safe and to be able to provide for them. And I know that's a bit of a cliche way of answering it, but I think for me, it's not so much about the location, it's how I feel at that point in my life. What about you?
For me, so I went to Tai Lopez event the other day, I think 2 days ago. And one of the tests that he tells everybody to do is 4 M's. People are intrinsically driven by these 4 M's that he came up with. One is mastery, which is status. Another one is mating, which is like sex, love. And another one is freedom. And another one is material things. So things like money, cars. And I scored the highest on freedom, meaning that I love to not be tied down to one place. I actually originally came to Dubai with the intention to move here completely. And after having taken that test 2 days ago, and my friend was saying, we should go to Spain. And another friend was saying, I'm in Chile, brother, come over. And I'm thinking, I want to go to all those places. So for me, Dubai serves a purpose of what's pretty much at the top. What people at the forefront of the business, creative mindsets are doing. So it gives me a perspective. That's what it's serving me to... And another thing is I think Dubai has always been the city that I wanted to always live in, actually. So I wanted to see for myself what it's like. And I always believe that if you want to, let's say, succeed, you have to shadow mentors who already have everything that you want. If I want to live in Dubai, I have to be close to the sun, which is Dubai. So I just came here. And that's what Dubai is for me. And I only have really amazing experiences. You know, I talked to quite a few entrepreneurs in the span of 2 weeks. It's very amazing. Like when I was in Bali or Australia, maybe I would talk to maybe 2 people, 3 people a week that are entrepreneurial. I would just go to the gym in my apartment. Everyone's a crypto trader, a business investor, entrepreneur in fitness. I talk to probably like 8, 9 every week. Completely different here. And a lot of the times we talk about how the average person is doing this. Average person thinks this way. I'm so happy that I get to meet people like you who have great mindsets. Now it's becoming normalized. I think entrepreneurs, the way we think, is very normal. One of the biggest businesses is helping entrepreneurs, like ClickFunnels, man. Russell Brunson, he's got millions of followers on Instagram. He's a celebrity, honestly. And Tai Lopez is a celebrity. And he only targets entrepreneurs who want to do better. And I think if we are truly striving to become the best versions of ourselves, we have to calibrate our standards. And this is so normal. The way we talk, we are not special, bro. We think that we are so smart, above average. I think that's the average. Above the average is the new average. I think we have to think that way. And we have to also make sure that we have good intentions and we will pull down the ladder for people who we care about, who have good intentions for us. We have to be great leaders. I think that's very important. At the start, I didn't feel like I was a leader, but I'm starting to understand my worth and value. I understand how I compare to other people, and I see that I'm doing so well. If I look at the trajectory of my life, I'm already a fantastic person, you know? And I think that should be the normal. A lot of people have, sorry, I'm going on a tangent.
No, please.
A lot of people have, I think, unhealthy relationship with money. If we want more, we are shallow. I don't think it should be that way. I think that everybody should want good experiences for themselves. Everybody should become as rich as they possibly can so they can help your family, like their families and people that they love. So if people feel like those entrepreneurs, they just want money, I think they maybe need to think about what they've been fed into their brain by the media. Maybe you should stay humble. You shouldn't want too much. If you want too much, you're going to be tempted by greed all the time. It is true, but at the same time, if we have a healthy relationship, we can attract beautiful things and use money for beautiful things. People in power must be good, and they must, if we find those people, we must help them as much as we can. So if I know that you have really good intentions, and if I know that you're incredibly talented, so much smarter than me, I'm going to invest in you perhaps as much as I would invest in myself. You know what I mean? Because I think that's a better ROI of my time and effort than just investing in myself.
Speaking like a true marketer now, I like it. You know what? I think entrepreneurship is actually about, maybe not necessarily about chasing money, but I think there's one thing that entrepreneurs have in common, and that is truly trying to be the best possible version of themselves. And usually a byproduct of that is then money and success.
100%.
And I think this is actually a really good note to end on. It gives everyone something to think about, what it is they're trying to achieve in life. And we also kind of touched on exactly where we started, which was about morals, being humble and all of that kind of stuff. So I think great place to end. I want to say thank you very much, Alex, for joining me on the TheoClarkePodcast, if I can get the name right. And I think this has been a fantastic episode 1. Really, we've set the bar. We're going to have to see where this goes.
Beautiful, man. Really enjoyed it. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. Take care.